Welcome to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share.
I want to welcome everybody to this month's episode of Calibration Point, our podcast, and I'm excited to have an individual with us with a little bit of a twist, and that is Cara is I say new, but she's been there for a little over a year now, a foundation executive who has come into the nonprofit sector working as a new foundation executive, but came from the corporate field. And she has agreed to come on and talk to us about what she's learned in the past year that might be beneficial to all of us in the nonprofit sector. So, Cara, thank you for giving us this time and so appreciate your willingness.
Well, thank you for having me, Jamie. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story.
Absolutely. So maybe to start, if you could just do just a high level, you have some interesting context in your family foundation. Maybe you could share how you got in as the new executive. And I would just qualify for our audience. Your family foundation is very impact driven. It's recognized regionally for that understanding as well. So it's a big deal that you've been able to make this transition and come in. So yeah, if you could share maybe just a little high level about that. And then I want to just right off the tee, we'll go into a couple things and I'll just tee you up with some questions, but I definitely want to hit on our first question is going to unpack what has been most surprising and maybe what you've learned that has surprised you over the past year. But first, just a high level on kind of how your pathway has gotten to this point.
Sure. So actually, I am 20 years dental hygienist. So I have lived here in the community all my life, met my husband while in college, dental hygiene, and practiced for 20 years. In that time, we got married, we started a family, and probably about 5 years ago, my mother and father-in-law had brought me on to the board for the family foundation. This was my first forte into anything, nonprofit, foundation-wise at all. So right off the bat, learning a lot, I wanted to ask a lot of questions, things like that. Jump forward 5 years from there. Believe it or not, dental hygiene is not easy on one's body. And I was starting to have some neck, some shoulders, some issues there. My husband was like, oh my gosh, you're not even 40. This is crazy. You're going to have to step back. Unbeknownst to me, my in-laws at the time had went to my husband probably a month or two after our conversation and had asked, here we are dealing, working with the organizations. We are always asking them their succession plan. What is our succession plan? If something were to happen to us today, can someone step up and still run the foundation as strategically as we are, now? And they realized that that's not the case. So my husband declined. And so they had said, I think Cara would be the route to go here. So they ended up asking me to come on as director. Never in my mind, even 2-3 years ago, would I have seen myself, in this career path, but it literally was the perfect timing for this. And so the way, again, our foundation works, it is very impactful, very strategic. And I knew this wasn't going to be let's cut back a couple of days of hygiene and just kind of dabble in this. I knew I had to go, full force into this. Yeah. And it was the best thing to do. We were lucky enough. I was able to do it. It hit at a perfect time. And boy, has this last year been a massive learning experience, but very exciting, very scary at first, intimidating at times. But I feel like I'm learning more and more, and it's been really good. It's been a good surprise.
Great. So exciting to make the transition over.
Yes.
Then let's just start with a fun question. What has surprised you in the past year about the nonprofit sector as you've gotten deeper into it? I mean, I should qualify that because you've been a part of the foundation before. It's not like you're new, but, coming in as now an executive in the foundation, spending your entire work life in it, living it, breathing it is very different than being in it kind of as a part of the foundation, obviously. So you're learning under the hood in ways many people never get to. So yeah, what are a couple things that have really surprised you as you've made the transition?
Yeah, there's been a few. Very early on, I was surprised at how similar the way I practice dental hygiene is to how our foundation functions with nonprofits. Yeah, it was one of those, you think they're completely, different, but I was lucky enough to work at an office that valued kind of building the trust and the relationship with patients. We didn't run just an assembly line of people in and out. I had time to truly get to know them as individuals. I was then able to give them individualized care. This means not putting everyone into the same boat on how their care is provided. And this is exactly how our foundation runs. We're very relational, transformational. We're not transactional. Sometimes seeing the real turn or return on investment is more complex than how many patients we're seeing on a day in, day out basis. It takes time. Years sometimes. I had patients over the years that we had recommended treatment plans for 4 years, and they would finally accept. And these plans were sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. And had we not established that trust, that relationship, that they never would have happened. So, looking back, those patients that I would ask for an extra 15 minutes to be added on to their, appointment times, which drove my office manager crazy, would pay off big. And what I found is it's the same with nonprofits. If they can just take the time to build the relationship, to have the conversations, they can lead to, larger, more consistent, even, plan giving in the long run. So don't give up on that. Don't think it's a waste of time, because that's kind of how our foundation runs. We really like to get to know the nonprofit, and it can lead to bigger and better, gifts and that true advocacy,
Right.
Yes. So it was the same in hygiene. You had to build that trust over time. So that was a surprise to me. I really thought this was going to be just completely different ends of the spectrum. And it wasn't. That was very similar.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it was good because it wasn't cleaning teeth that kept me as a hygienist. It was my patients, the relationship. So yeah, I was happy to see that.
Very fascinating. So a similarity in the process and how we build relationships. Yeah. Okay. I can take that. That's really interesting. What else has stuck out?
And I've lived in this community my entire life, yet I had never set foot in, some of the areas in our community. Okay. Sadly, I wasn't alone, when discussing my career change with families and friends and colleagues. They were also somewhat clueless of like neighborhoods where they were located. Even some of the nonprofits I had talked about or mentioned visiting. Similar was the confusion of why and how and what exactly I would be doing. After a year, I can now answer those, easier, but definitely don't assume that, as a nonprofit, don't assume that just because someone's lived in the community all their life, they're professional, they've lived here, they don't necessarily, whether it be know your nonprofit, or if they do, they might not know the ins and outs of exactly what you do. Example, if you have after school programs, I think the first thing that popped into my head prior to this was, okay, they're going to do, some tutoring, some after school homework. They'll, play with the kids and, yes, a little more into that, but, some of the places that do wraparound care, let these people know, really almost have a story behind the details that go into your organization, because there's so much more that I think people don't know. You don't know what you don't know, yeah. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, it's been very eye-opening to see how giving our community and what is out there. So that's
a good point, that we can often make the assumption that people understand the neighborhoods we're in, the community that we're in, to your point. I mean, you had lived in the metro area that you're now the executive of a foundation in, and even living in that metro area, still not knowing all the neighborhoods, not all the organizations. And I would say that's pretty accurate to your observation, that we make those assumptions a lot.
Yeah.
to our detriment. Okay. So surprises, maybe kind of shift that one more time, now kind of in a different vein. Not just what has surprised you, but has there been anything that you've been like, wow, I wish more people understood this about the nonprofit organizations that you've gotten a chance to be a part of in the sector in general?
Yes, definitely. This field is full of some incredibly hardworking, driven, caring individuals that they live and breathe their mission. And this last year, I've seen multiple changes in leadership, but whether that be they go to another nonprofit or completely different field, but I've yet to see someone go and not still be a huge supporter or advocate of where they left. And I think that's impressive and says a lot about an organization. And I don't think you see that as much in for-profit. A lot of times you hear I left because of this. Even the people that I've seen moved on are still advocates of these organizations. And I just think that's incredible to see. And that's something, that shines about the nonprofit.
Yeah. That sense of kind of lifelong advocacy for the cause.
Yeah. Also their willingness to kind of collaborate and partner on things. At our foundation, we kind of look at that kind of sparks our interest sometimes. And don't get me wrong, I think it's hard. I think, you have a vision or an idea, and sometimes giving up some of that control can be tough. I've even had that with parenting, trying to delegate to my kids. But, ultimately, I think it lessens duplication of service. You can reach a larger population. And then not to mention, when you get these brilliant minds together to brainstorm, it can lead to some amazing ideas and greater impact. And that's another thing. I don't know that we see that as much in for-profit, for obvious reasons, but that's been really, really impressive.
So I guess the other thing I would just say in that is, so you've had some surprises, and as you've transitioned over, kind of eye-openers, then you're also you're definitely harmonizing on the idea of the passion and what you've seen and that other people need to better understand. One of the things that we see a lot and that I hear a lot from people coming into the field, and I'd be curious, your observation of that. And you and I have talked a little bit about this, but I often hear from people coming in, and I'll kind of frame it this way, is that they are surprised at how often the executive director is the hero of the story as opposed to the board.
Yeah.
And they're a little bit frustrated, or not frustrated, but they feel like the board should be more at the center of the story than the executive director. Have you witnessed anything like that?
That's definitely another thing that caught me, surprising at the beginning, is how much board culture and engagement can help or hinder the nonprofit. Yep. The first few months, we were meeting with multiple organizations, for introduction purposes, or, sometimes they would reach out to my mother-in-law for almost, mentoring type sessions. And consistently, the lack of board engagement would come up. Yeah, I also, and understandably noted, that these leaders a lot of times were really focused on particular skill sets and credentials, which I completely get. But something I also was noticing was these boards that were, really diverse, with not just the credentials, but the members who had huge passion, whether from personal experience or just, great interest, had more engaged members who were enthusiastic, and they were advocating these organizations. So this is something I immediately started to look at when we were looking into an organization. I would go onto their websites, I would look at their board, and I didn't just look at the name and the credential. I like a short bio. I love the ones that do short videos where they have these actual board members do a very short video of, here's what I do, and here's why I'm here sitting on this board advocating for this organization. I really like to see that diversity and to almost get to know their board members, because that's definitely something that I caught on to really quickly sitting in on these sessions. So,
and we talk a lot about it, just the idea that the collective leadership ceiling in the board sets the growth ceiling in the organization.
Yeah,
and that's really critical.
Yeah.
And from a funding perspective, obviously that's a big deal for you guys.
Mhm.
And, as we start to look at how we build confidence is going to come from seeing a really strong board in place.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So has there been anything as you've transitioned over and worked with now so many different nonprofit organizations in the past year that has frustrated you?
Lack of
Besides the board.
Yeah, that's true. That's been eye-opening and frustrating all in itself, but lack of transparency. Our foundation, we want the good, the bad, the ugly, and every organization has it. Like, we're not naive to think that everybody's just perfect in their organization. And what an organization has struggled with in the past, just be honest. Tell us how you fixed it or how you plan to fix it. If it's a current issue, let us help brainstorm. Point is, if we're involved with an organization, we believe in their mission and we want them to succeed. So any issue that they are having, we want them to resolve it and are actually willing to help. And I think there are other donors out there like us. And once you understand who they are, and I understand that's not everyone, but again, if you've taken the time to build a relationship and get to know them, you do know who they are. Right. And ultimately, both them and your organization will benefit from it. And so that's been, the frustrating part. And it's scary. I get it. They're trying to somewhat sell, here's what we do. But I like to kind of hear it all. And I like to kind of be brought in and help if need be. So that would be one thing. Kind of on the same end of that is the feeling that you're being sold,
right?
Versus an organization, seeking out to get to know you and your passions first. Yep. And you've pointed this out before. If we align, it's worth the time. But if we don't, time would be better spent finding others who do. And that doesn't mean that they can't, contact us for conversations. Plenty have, but some we have yet to support financially, but we will advocate for and suggest to people whose passions do align. So these first conversations, I think, are important ones. They need to feel real and not forced. And that kind of brings me back, again, similar to my years in dental hygiene. My job was not to sell a product, but to evaluate the needs, teach the patient what is best for their overall health. And if I'm successful, it'll lead to profit for the practice, but it doesn't always happen upon the first visit, and you can't push it. And you can't push something on someone who doesn't believe in the need themselves. And so I think it's the same with nonprofits. It's you that if I love cats, you can get us to be advocates. But if I love dogs, I'm probably not the one to waste time on. So yeah,
absolutely right.
Yeah. So that would be probably the only two. And I haven't seen that either one of those. I haven't seen a ton. I've seen some of that, or I've got that feeling from some, but I haven't. I've been more impressed than I have been frustrated with an option.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So then, kind of in a closing question around that, what have you found about the funder community? You coming in as someone who's not a lifelong nonprofit person, and also coming into a metro area where there are a lot of independent funders, along with obviously lots of donors, but independent funders from corporate foundations, other private foundations, individual philanthropists that have a significant impact. What has been your experience? Have they welcomed you? Have they been like, oh, we kind of operate in our own little clique? Like, and keep in mind, we're keeping your name covered. No one knows the foundation that you're with, but I mean, all jokes aside, like, what's been your experience with the broader funder community?
I think they've been very open. Again, I guess you can call me a nervous Nelly. Again, this was scary to undertake and to get into something new. I'm definitely still, novice to this, but I feel like everybody has been very open, very willing to help and to network. That's been a huge thing too. You get to know one person and they introduce you to another. It's another thing you could say I've been impressed with. I think they come with open arms and are willing to get to know you and help you in any way that they can. So I've been impressed with that. Yeah.
Have you found, so what we find in many regions and even nationally is how tight the funder community is and how quick word gets around, positive or negative, about organizations, whether that's regionally or nationally or internationally. Have you found that as well, that there's a lot of connectedness within the funder community?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's definitely some connectiveness there. But again, I think the places that we've kind of intentionally, some of the things I've been getting involved in just to kind of get some experience, I feel like everybody's been very open to kind of letting me in.
Good.
So.
And that's what we find is, and I try to tell our clients a lot, remember how tight the funder community is, that if there's something askew in your organization, that other funders will learn about it. And if there's something really great in your organizations, other funders will learn about it as well.
Yeah.
So kind of a closing question then, and we'll bring this session to an end. Do you have just any piece of advice for nonprofit organizations in general from what you've found over the past year as a new foundation executive?
I still go back to just don't assume that everybody knows exactly what it is that you do, no matter who they are, how long they've lived here, their professional background. Don't assume. And relationship. I always go back to be able to communicate and feel these people out while letting them know what you do at your organization, while getting to know them. Don't think it's a waste of time. Definitely put forth the effort to have the conversation, and you never know where that will lead. They might know someone who knows someone who knows someone. I mean, you just never know where those leads might come from. And so always be out there talking and communicating to people, telling them what you do.
So understand the why, what, and the how, and make sure you're translating.
Yes, absolutely.
And then translating at a personal level and making sure that we're building relationships. That's what I hear you saying.
Definitely.
Well, we sure appreciate it. And we'll definitely have to have you come back on as you get further down this journey and maybe do a follow-up to share how things have deepened as you go further down this route. So we sure appreciate your time. And so thank you for you coming on here.
Well, thanks for having me, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.